Women on a Green Mission. Follow along as two friends document their unfurling permaculture journeys.
Join our chats each week where we'll be sharing how we and others apply permaculture to our gardens and daily life.
We're no experts. We're at the start of our journey, fumbling our way to a greener life. We love your company along the way. Welcome to this week's podcast. So we have a really awesome guest and he's been super popular. It's the second time around. Mm-hmm. So it is Will Power from Maplewood Permaculture. And this week he's talking about site sector analysis, and it's actually a really good conversation. It reminded me of a few little tidbits that I'd sort of forgotten about after, I'd been through the process of doing the site sector.
Yeah. But, and I loved his idea of like going back and doing a site sector after you've implemented stuff to see how that stuff has had a knock-on effect on your plan. Like I thought that was really cool. I really want to do that once we've kind of, done a few things to just make sure that it is still the way we want it to be.
Yeah, I think that's really, really valuable. But yeah, we go into, he goes into that a lot, in this episode. And I'm sure that you'll absolutely enjoy it. But before we jump into the episode, how's your week been? What you been up to?
Good. Well, hubby's been away this week, so it's just been me and the kids and my mum. So my mum has come and she's staying with us for a few weeks. So it thankfully coincided with 3 days of mainly sunshine. We still got a bit of rain at night and the afternoons, but sunny days. So we have been in the garden again, finally. So I've potted up a lot of my seedlings that just needed a bit more space. I fed them all because they were looking really sad. And then
what'd you feed them with?
Again. I just fed them with like a seaweed kind of tea that I'd made up. Hopefully it's good. I don't know, we'll see.
They respond and they'll sort of just go poing.
Yes. And my mum has the same bad habit that we have of just buying plants and buying seeds. And so she actually came with her motorhome with about 100 plants.
Oh my God.
I'm not kidding. Like, that's not an exaggeration. She had 80 tube stocks, so they were small, in a tray of hop bushes, because we're going to plant them along the border of where the tiny home is as our like windbreak and like a shelter from the sun and that kind of thing. And then she had like all these natives that she'd found, and she'd been like researching while she was on her trip, like what would work in our area, like coastal natives. And so she's bought grevilleas and she's bought all like acacias, and there was like all these correas. They were gorgeous, and hakea. And so she bought all that. And then 2 days later, I took her to the local nursery and she bought like another $150 worth of plants. And then we went to the land care nursery on Thursday and she's, bought another, 20 plants. So yeah, we've just been doing a lot of pocket planting because it's not actually ready to be planted out properly yet. I'll have to take a photo. There's like all these random mounds of like earth and compost mixed together. And these trees, because we haven't actually made the garden bed yet. We know that's where it's going, and we've just put them in the ground.
Oh.
So
how are they surviving the wildlife? Have you had sort of a few tops munched off?
So far the kangaroos haven't bothered. They've more been interested in the 1 or 2 nights I think they've jumped the fence in my veggie patch. All the stuff that Mum's bought's fine. The main thing is just dogs doing zoomies and knocking them over. So I've netted some of them with chicken wire, and then some of them, the local land care said they've got some. They have like, those ones you see on the side of the road, the core flute plastic ones. Yeah. They've got a couple of them. They said I can have for free, but they also have these other ones that are made of cardboard, but they'll last for about 6 months before they break down. So I think it'll be long enough for them to get established. And then he said they pretty much just start breaking down and disintegrate. So we're going to go buy some of those. Yeah, and hopefully the dogs don't think it's a chew toy. So we'll see.
Start ripping them up and playing with them.
Yeah. And I turned my compost and I put a roof on it because it was just getting way too wet with all the rain. So I turned it and I've roofed it, temporarily kind of roofed it just the best I could with some corrugated iron, and just weighted it down in case we get some winds. But yeah, so I've done that. I did lots and lots and lots of outdoor stuff. Lots of buckets, lots of barrows of compost and manure and planting. So very, very busy week in the garden. How about you?
Had a good workout by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I'm getting like tennis elbow. Like it hurts because that repetitive movement of like shoveling.
You need
But
to,
I need to look at that.
Change over. I used to get that as well, and now I'm like, okay, I'll do, like, if I'm doing like 10 barrow loads, I go, right, I'll do, one for one, and I'll actually change sides. And it's funny, when I had Bowen therapy done as well, he picked up the same thing on so basically the muscles and the fascia on either side of my body. He said one's longer than the other. He said you obviously do things to one side, and then
I'm not that coordinated. I don't reckon I could shovel the opposite way. I'd
you
struggle with
can
that.
you can give it a go. You'll be really, it's like riding with the wrong hand at first. It's like really awkward and like, oh, I can't get anything. But then once you get used to it, you kind of just get the technique, and
Okay.
it helps. It definitely helps.
And what about you? What have you been up to?
Oh, look, this week's been crazy with work. I've been doing quite a lot of hours in here. I've been in my little box, just pumping out a ton of work. But in the garden, my seedlings are coming along. So we've got second generation. So our next succession of brassicas are coming along. I've got I've got to actually feed our brassicas because we've got the same issue as you, that a lot of the nutrients are leaching out, and they're really at that stage now that we've got a little bit of sun. They're like, yes, we want to grow. So I think over the weekend we're going to be doing some worm tea and some maybe some compost on there, and maybe some weed tea. See how I go with that. I don't want to sort of wet them down too much, so
I know.
maybe we'll do some foliar sprays. But so we've got that happening. We're getting some more chickens on Saturday. So we've booked in. We're getting 12 new girls to add to the mix. So I tell you what, chickens are just so, like, pardon the pun, they're just plucky little buggers, because we've got quite a few elderly birds now. Like, you can see they're starting to decline, and there's one in there, like, she's got a really dark comb. It's all shriveled and fallen over, and she's really quite light. Like, she's lost a lot of condition. And she's like the little old grandma. Like, she shuffles around, and my rule is, if you have a quality of life, you live. And if you don't, then, we make the decision, and their suffering is ended. So there was one last night. I walked in, and little old grandma, she's sitting on the ground. She can't get up on the perch anymore. So I went, oh, all right, let's, she's still plucky enough that I picked her up, still protest quite a bit. And I popped her in the laying box, and I snuggled her in. Basically, I tucked her all in, and I thought, you know what, this is probably, it's, getting cooler. This will be her last night for sure. Like, I'll go out there tomorrow morning, and she would have passed in her sleep. So I'll go out with my egg basket, take a plastic bag ready, because, we bag them up, put them in the deep freeze, and then plant them under the tree when we plant trees. So I got up there, opened the coop door, no one's in there. I'm looking under, around the feed tubs, and I'm looking under the laying boxes. And then I've looked out, she's like standing around the corner, basically looking at me going, what, you think I was going to die last night? I don't think so, lady. She's out there. She's scratching around, she's, eating bugs, and, still going slow, still being a little oldie. But, I just went, how resilient are you? Like, you're not sick, you're just getting old and you are declining. But I just looked at her and went, not today. You've still got a quality of life, not today. I went, they just never cease to amaze me. But, 12 new girls will be coming in. So we're going to divvy up between the big coop and the little coop. And the other good thing that happened this week is we had originally decided to get rid of our sex pest duck. So we have 8 Indian runner ducks, and one of the so we've got mum and dad, and then we've got the 6 kids. And so basically the big brother, like, he's the biggest boy we've got. He's gorgeous, beautiful olive coloured beak, and he's gorgeous. But he was giving the smallest girl a really hard time. Like, he wasn't letting her near the rest of the he just constantly chased her around. So we went, oh, well, we've either got to even the numbers up a little bit more and get more girls in, and it's not really the season to get more girls in, or we're going to have to find a home for him. And then someone on one of the groups I was in said, hey, I'm actually looking for a drake because I've got a couple of girls. And I went, oh, perfect. So we had organised it all. And then over the weekend, she said, I'll message you. And then she got busy and didn't message. And then in that time, we were sort of observing him more with the flock. And then, my husband said, oh, does he really have to go? Like, he sort of settled down. And I went, nah, let's keep him. So it kind of worked out. She did message me, and then in the end I said, we've decided to keep. She said, nah, look, that's totally fine. But that was a good outcome because, I really didn't want to let him go because I think his babies are going to be absolutely gorgeous, when we have more next spring. But, that was a good outcome for all.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So let's jump into the episode. Enjoy the conversation about site sector analysis with Will from Maplewood, and we'll see you on the other side.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another week of recording. This week we have our first double up guest, who you were leading in the leaderboard, Will, for the highest ranking in the show, but Hugh Richards has pipped you at the post now, so unfortunately. But we have Will from Maplewood Permaculture joining us again to chat all things site sector.
Is this going to be like Saturday Night Live where you get like a 5-timers jacket when you...
I think that is a really good idea. I'm going to start designing it now.
To introduce that.
Get working on it.
So before we get into today's chat, can we just all let everybody know where we're recording today? So Jo, where are you?
So I'm in my home office in the Hunter Valley on the land of the Wanneroo people.
And Will, where are you?
I am in my garden shed in Anderson, Wanneroo country as well.
Oh, lovely. And I'm up in the Northern Rivers on Yago country in my tiny home. We've moved into our tiny home. Yes, out of the mud.
We're all in our little spaces today.
We are.
Yes. So we wanted to jump on today and chat to you about site sector. Will did a bit of this on our PDC with us and tried to teach us how to draw really well because he's fabulous at drawing. And he's actually got a new offering, Jo. I don't know if you saw it, but I am going to get it done. That he'll, instead of plan your property, you can tell Will. You'll probably explain your own offering better than I can.
Look, I'll still plan it if you really want me to. But I was getting questions from usually it's PDC students who obviously don't need me to come and design for them because they're capable of doing it themselves. But I'll just do the illustration part when they get to the end if they like. So if they'd like one done in the style that I draw them, then I can help them with that.
And what a beautiful stamp in time to have an artwork of your property and what your vision was. I think that's so beautiful, or what you want it to be, kind of thing.
Yeah, Anthea and I did it for ourselves. Obviously, when we'd done our design course as well, and we've changed it heaps since then. But that drawing for the first couple of years really, directed what we were doing. And then we did another one because Anthea did her course a little bit later than I did. And that was an updated design. We're probably up to, I don't have time. I've got to draw a new one.
You'll need to go and get someone to come in and draw for you.
Yeah. We're probably at a good point in time to draw another one now, I think.
Yeah. But even if it does change, I think getting that framed and putting it on the wall somewhere is so pretty. They're gorgeous what you do.
Thank you.
They're an absolute work of art. They really are. It's not this thing that I've got behind me where it's, things are overlapped and, there's you can still see lines. I did that electronically, but I've still got areas that have got faint lines where I couldn't rub things out properly. It's very, very practical, but it's not attractive.
Yeah,
it's not something I want to hang on the wall inside.
I think I probably said to you during the course, it's a Ro Morrow quote of don't confuse something like don't confuse beautiful design with good design. But I hope that I do both, that it will capture everything like you've said, Jo, it's very functional, but I hope I can make it aesthetically pleasing as well.
And that gets the emotion into it behind it as well. When you're looking at something that is aesthetically pleasing, you really want to create it. It's not just some lines on a piece of paper and you're looking at it going, oh, well, I've just got to map that out. it really does evoke that emotion. And I think that's a big part of it as well, especially when you get bogged down in some of the details, or you get overwhelmed. Like, you have that moment of, okay, I've done a few things. Crap, where do I go to from here? Like, the next project's a big project. So being able to have that to look at that and go, yeah, you know what? I'm still focusing, on what my dream is and what my why is.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
aspirational.
that's it. It's a bit like buy-in. Like for a lot of people, it's sort of they're getting invested in doing it, and it's something that keeps spurring them along. Or sometimes it's good when there's multiple parties involved, and so then like getting everyone sort of, oh yeah, we're all working to this drawing, this map. Yeah,
Yeah, it's nice. But today we're talking about site sector. So
yeah.
what is
Can't draw
it?
one of those without that.
Yeah. So what is it? Why is it? Why should we do it? What does it involve? Just kind of a 101 of site sector.
Yeah. All right. So site sector analysis is look, it's pretty much the first stage of the design once you've mapped what you've got. So we'll do a base map, obviously, of which could just be a printout of the of a photograph of aerial photograph of the property or a satellite view or something like that, or you could draw a base map, or you could do whatever you like digitally as well. And then the site sector is when we get into analysing. It's essentially the flow of energies and influences on the landscape that you intend to design on. So it's about it's that observation before interaction. It's a lot of collection of data, and a lot of that is data in terms of like your personal observations of the place. And then that becomes one of the factors that you'll use in your design process to influence, what goes where.
I'd love to touch on, Will, when you talk about the flow of energy. So if you've got, someone's listening to this and they might, just be starting their journey into permaculture or never heard of it before, when you're talking about the flow of energies, can you sort of explain that a little bit for someone who may not understand?
Yeah, absolutely. So think of it as another word could be like the environmental influences or factors on the property, and energies being movement of the sun, movement of wind, movement of water, where nutrients going to move through the landscape. So it's really anything that's sort of coming in or out of the property. So you're looking at what's coming in and going to affect your decision making, and then also the same respect goes to what you do on the landscape is then going to influence what leaves your property as well. It could be as much as you decide to put trees somewhere and your neighbour's solar panels are in shade because of you, like that sort of. So you're considering what's coming into you, but also what you're what likely impact there might be down the track of you doing things as well. So yeah, there's a bit of a. I can sort of take you through a list of what we look for as far as all of those energies and elements or factors. I need to come up with a good word that sort of covers all of those, I think.
Need an acronym.
Actually, there is one. Doesn't come to mind right now, but I think maybe Roy Morris got an acronym for it. Yeah.
Okay. And it's not just like physical things too. I know when we talked about it in our course, it's things like what your community is also like, and the social aspects of what's going on in your area, and things like your rates, and are you connected to water. So there's both that physical and kind of social aspects to it as well.
Yeah, that's so important. So because it kind of gets like it's when it's written about, and even when we're teaching it, like it's called site sector analysis, but a big part of that site is the human component. So if we're talking about culture, and we're talking about what are the human influences in and out as well. So we're talking about like the ways that you move around the site. A big one we'll come to this a bit about your behaviours, your patterns the way that you move around the property is a good one to document early in the process. But it could be external as well. So we're looking at things like noise pollution from traffic, or privacy, or preserving views for the garden as well. So looking in and out, and then those really nice interactions, like it could be that where is that spot on the fence that you trade with the neighbour when you're swapping strawberries for citrus and that sort of thing. So street library, front gate stall, that sort of thing.
Yeah. And even wider than that, like we talk about, good schools that might be around, or is there a farmer's market close by? Like that comes into it too.
Absolutely. So, we could go right out to, you do your site sector analysis, and we could look right out to like a bioregion analysis, which could be really cool if you were early in the process of like finding a property or deciding where you're going to put down roots, looking at the whole region and seeing, all right, an analysis of my life that I want to set up for homesteading, self-sufficiency, whatever your angle is, and saying, okay, well, what are the education prospects that I have in this area? What's my access to healthcare? What are the utilities? Like how do I provide my basic needs, whether I'm going to be off grid or is there, this water source, this electricity, etc., that you can tap into. The farmers market was a good one. So, what's my food security look like already in this region? Is it something that you can contribute to, or is it, because it's pretty, it's overwhelming to say to people like, we're going to try to provide everything on our own. So no, like doing that research of the area could certainly be something that you look at as well. Disaster management would come into that later on too.
Yeah.
And I think too, I like that you touched on that it can be overwhelming to think about, trying to provide everything for yourself. The reality is for most of us that isn't a reality. Like it's physically impossible to be providing absolutely everything for yourself because of the way we live, where we live, our regions, our climate, various factors, just time constraints. So to understand, how you can then interact outside of your little, your little plot of land or property or whatever you've got is so important.
Yeah, it's really, the key of it is that analysis, isn't it? It's going like, what is the current situation I'm in? What are my intentions or my ideals that I'm working towards? And then what's the reality that I'm slotting into here? To make, give yourself the best chance of a design that, works without being too far pie in the sky or the other way, not striving for much at all.
Yeah, and that's something that we did too with our design is that, we had some big plans for, well, when I say me, had some big plans. Anthony didn't have them, to have quite a substantial farm stall, and I was going to be selling, fresh produce and homemade goods and a whole heap of different things. And then, over the year, I've really sat with that and thought about it. And again, energy, looking at how much energy that I need to put into that, given my lifestyle and where I am in life and at my stage of life. And I had a realization that I don't have that level of energy to be giving to that. So that's now starting to change form as well. So I've had to reimagine that and essentially reanalyze, my site taking into those considerations. So it can definitely change.
Yeah, it's a good one because it's where like the lines start to get blurred in the design process of there's site sector analysis, and then there's needs and wants and yields, and then there's functions and connections, and then there's energy flow, and it's the site sector doesn't determine everything because it has to marry up with those other influences going on. So like when you analyze your time and energy and that sort of thing, you see what's sort of realistic and what's possible.
So what is a bit of a list of things that we can include in our site sector analysis?
I always start with sunlight. So looking at the sun and shade patterns that fall across the property. So for your listeners and viewers that are looking to do their own site sector analysis, the one I always recommend is suncalc.org.
You've got a YouTube video on that, don't you?
Yes, yeah. So I did a little a tutorial explaining sort of the basics of how to use it. It's essentially puts an overlay over over satellite view from Google Maps. And you can, it's really like for anyone who's not played with it before, we sort of like we're taught sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And then we look at, like, and speaking about our latitude roughly here, you go, well, actually, it's like a little bit more complicated than that,
Right.
because it only really,
Yep.
yes, it does on the two equinox dates, but the rest of the time it's either going to be, more northerly in the sky or behind you, southerly, if you're looking that way. So the first thing we'll plot is our winter solstice. So usually 21st of June or thereabouts. So we're looking at where is the angle of the sun most narrow coming into your property. I put a bit of paper in front of me when I was thinking about doing this, because I was like, it's probably just easier to sort of, explain a bit like what we're doing. So like if you've got your property, does that look all right?
Yeah.
So if you've got your property in north facing up, so, we sort of go like east and west, and these couple of arcs that I've drawn on. In summer, the sun's passing much more overhead. So if you were to stand outside in your backyard and point to the sun, you'd put your arm straight up in the sky to point to the sun or thereabouts. If it's winter and you're looking north and you would point at the sun, you wouldn't find the sun if you're putting your hand straight up. You'd be pointing at an angle out in front of you. So the sun's much lower in the sky. We've got that's casting longer shadows across your property. And then it's affecting your growing spaces. So something that's like a top growing space, in summer might be completely, in shade for the course of winter.
I'm really finding that.
Yeah. And then you also have like the whole thing of the sun doesn't rise east and west. And at our latitude particularly, it's more like a cross on the property where, the sun's sort of rising in winter in the northeast and setting in the northeast. The sun's not rising in the east. It's still easterly, but it's a much more narrow arc that you're only getting this much sun during winter, whereas summer, it's going to be down here on this other part of the X behind you at our latitude. And you've got this full, this is why we're getting so many hours of sunlight during summer, because the arc's much wider. And then you've got shadows where you wouldn't normally have shadows. You've got light where you wouldn't normally have light at those two different times of the year. So I like it, the sunlight's such a key one, as far as, you obviously want to boost your photosynthesis levels as much as you can and that sort of thing. Yeah. But also human behavior, depending on what part of the how far advanced your site is, the sunlight's going to drive, placement of your buildings. It's going to determine if you're accessing, the best range of solar energy, right down to if you've already done all that part. It might be just that, where do you like to sit in the morning, or where is that spot where you get to watch the sunset on, on your birthday, plan that time of year, that sort of thing. Like you could be so specific and say, like, I'm going to plant this tree because the sun's going to set behind it on, this date or anniversary or what. You could do really special personal things by doing like that sort of analysis of the garden.
Yes, we've got these really tall gum trees on the block next to us that are quite bushy at the top. And in summer, the sun cleared them, like well and truly. And now it's getting a bit lower. It's literally passing through that canopy. So where I've put my beds, I'm not getting anything. And in my head, I was like, oh, it'll be winter. They'll be low enough on the trunks that only the trunks will cast the shadow. But I'm in that in-between season where the branches and the canopy are casting shadow, and I've got to wait now till it gets low enough that it will clear the canopy now and it'll be just from the trunks, which I'm hoping that will happen. But then I've got vacant land either side of me, so eventually those things will get knocked down as well. So I'm kind of in that, I don't want to make anything too permanent, because what's going to work now?
No, you've got a heap of observation still to.
So everything we're doing is very semi-permanent, like it's movable and it's just for now, and keeping that in the back of our heads and just taking heaps of photos to kind of remind myself what it looks like at that time of year, because I know I'm going to forget by next winter how lack of sun is in that area. And, where I can have really good sun at the moment is where a driveway is going to be. So it's like, do I bother doing that? Like the driveway is going to go in 6 months. Like I feel like we're double doing everything and double handling our beds because we just don't know at the moment,
Yeah, that's it. I like how you said like it's semi-permanent. And I think that's I think that's just a pragmatic way to do it. I find like even though we're talking about permaculture, permanent, we have we design flexibility into it. So in the short term, you want to grow some veggies.
Totally.
So you put beds in, off you go, and then your design will evolve. More observation you do, and it's those sort of. I think like those sort of decisions are no sweat. Put a veggie garden in, move the veggie garden.
Yeah, I mean they're all annuals, so
Yeah,
it's only a
exactly.
season that it's going to be in there for.
Yeah.
Although my husband's hating that, he's like, "Are you telling me I've got to move these in 6 months' time?" I'm like, potentially, yes.
We've got to do this all over again.
Don't build them too well.
Yeah.
We had exactly the same thing. So we've moved our veggie garden already from one area to another because it just got smashed in summer. So then I moved it to an area that just didn't love it in winter because I didn't, and this is, before I really understood site sector. I was still cognizant of, what was happening with the sun, but not to the degree I needed to be. So now we're actually doing another move. And again, it's still quite temporary. We're not putting anything permanent because, again, we want to test and measure and make the decisions based on the results that we get, as opposed to, well, this should work because, there's other factors that I may not have considered as well. So, we're in the same boat. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what else comes after sun then?
I usually then move on to wind. So looking at what your wind vectors are. So which, again, imagine, what we're sort of doing is looking top down on the property. And if we've drawn a ring around the property, a circle onto the property, and we're looking at almost dividing it up into overlaying pie charts into these sectors. So we're looking at getting as much wind observation done as we can through the year. So I find that's one, like we can use SunCalc online to do the sun. But if you go and search for your wind data, I just recently got told about a new website it's new to me anyway. That I'll get it to you so you can put it in the notes. But what it was about is basically that it's really hard to get accurate wind data because it's so defined by your local site topography, what vegetation you have, what buildings, fence lines, etc. So, I'll get my data from a lot of our climate data comes from Tokyo College, which is literally just a couple of k's down the road. But they are, much lower down towards the river, like the valley floor, than we are. We're sort of up on a little bit of an escarpment. So the way the wind approaches those two properties is totally different. So the best, I think, is really to do your own legwork for that one and make your own observations. And then try to take shortcuts by having a chat to the neighbours or other locals, go down to the pub and find out from the other farmers or growers or whoever, that sort of thing. Because at least, it's obviously going to be unpredictable to some extent, but we're trying to predict out as much as we can so that we know where to put shelter belts or windbreaks. Where, would it be more optimal to move the shed 20 feet that way so that, it's providing this shelter on this wind vector, as opposed to just plonking it there because we think it looks good and then creating a wind channel that comes and guts the vegetable garden every spring or that sort of thing. So because for around here, we're pretty regularly dealing with damaging westerlies, which is such it is what it is, but it fits so well in the fact that we also want to screen out that harsh summer sun, so that western afternoon aspect of sun. So really, when we talk about stacking functions, shelter belts, when we look at those two parts of the site sector analysis, we're stacking afternoon summer sun protection with westerly damaging wind protection. Then we want to maintain usually a pretty open aspect to the east, to let a lot of morning light in for a whole lot of elements that can be really good for. And that's where we, being on the east coast, so we've got southeast easterly approaching cool, refreshing breezes without like
And
sort of
they're a
that damage.
godsend, aren't they? In the middle of summer, when they come through, it is just like everyone goes, "Oh, thank goodness."
Yeah, they can be very welcome. And then it's sort of like you could plot your wind right down to that's sort of like the overall pattern, damage that side and calm or refreshing that side. But then we'll also get like an east coast low, quite possible from about April to June here is when they sort of be at their most prevalent. And then that southerly wind starts bringing a bit of energy with it as well. So you might not be designing a whole shelter belt there, but it might be like a couple of key hardy tree placements or something that just, like take a bit of the brunt out of that coming in without being something that blocks those more welcoming winds or knocks your light out or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
We've sort of got like, we're lucky where we've got a couple of Angophora that are growing that are just like they've got a large enough crown that they shelter. They can take the sort of the filtering of like a major sort of front coming through, but it's not enough to like totally take any cool, refreshing breeze coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And the next couple things on the list?
So definitely water. So sun, wind, water. What do things need to survive? So we're mapping exactly that sort of thing. So for water, it's a little bit like this part ties in. You kind of can't do water very well without doing your topography and your contour as well. So even if you don't do contour being finding points of equal elevation on your property. Because water is always going to want to sit. It's going to run level. It's going to sit level. So if you've got 2 points that are level and we join them, we're going to have water that's going to be able to spread across the landscape. So that's something that you guys know that we want to do to our properties. So we need that sort of topography knowledge to then understand where water is going to run to. So at the same time, even if we don't do a contour map, like getting your site surveyed, it could just be as simple as you can usually find they're not terribly detailed, but a broad scale topography map of your area that will give you some idea of where what your elevation is and where your contour lines across. Say, like for me, I can zoom out and sort of look on
6 maps.
And look across Patterson basically and see like where the ridges are and that sort of thing. But what we want to find is just locally on your property, where are the ridges and where are the valleys? So is there anywhere that's a high point and where our low point? We're looking where water might be entering the property and then running down from. We're looking at where water is going to spread across the property, or we're looking at where is it going to pool and collect somewhere, basically. And then later on in the design, when we've mapped those parts and we've analysed them, we start going, well, how do we work with what we've got?
Yeah. In an urban context, that could just be that, there's been, erosion in a certain spot on your block. So that is a low area where you get soggy, kind of wet things.
Yeah, for those urban sites,
growing there. And
it's, I probably really looking at the hard spaces and consider like, I think everyone gets the whole idea of, a rooftop being a water catchment and we can put gutters on and tank it and that sort of thing. But to really think that driveways do the same. It's essentially a hard surface that water has got to run off to somewhere. And can we work with that? Can we send it somewhere where we want it to be? Because
and your neighbours, right? They're hard surfaces where they're going to impact your site.
Yep, that's it. One of the first things I'm normally doing in the urban environment is go and have a sticky beak straight over the fence. So it's usually colorbond and, you can't see what's going on. Have a look over the fence and see, is there some channeling going on? Is it running down their fence and then behind your shed? That's a pretty common one.
Well, a really good example of that is we caught up with Kath, another one of the students from our PDC, and
Yeah.
she was sharing with us, the problems that she's having from the neighbouring property with a disconnected downpipe and how that's impacting. So,
Yes.
there's, she's coming up with innovative solutions to be able to, help her neighbour manage that without actually causing, any damage, but also helping her to
Flooding to her
manage
site.
that water flow into her patch as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. It's that's an influence of energy moving into your property. Like it has to be accommodated for the design to work. And thinking, like, the other thing I notice when I'm doing it is thinking about, what's it bringing with it as well, or what can you observe at the same time? So, like, when I'm sticking my head over the fence, I'm also sort of looking at, it's usually pretty obvious when it's like had glyphosate sprayed all the way along, like, their side of the fence. You can't see it on your side necessarily. So it's like observing there's so many influences that could be coming in that setting, in that urban setting, where someone's practices are right on top of your practices.
Yeah.
And how they're using their site could, definitely come and influence yours. And then, just looking at, like, where is it pooling, or where have you got a boggy spot, something like that. And then it's a matter of, are we trying to eliminate that boggy spot by mitigating the water higher up in the landscape first so that it doesn't come down to that zone, or do we like the fact that it's a boggy spot and we're going to choose some plantings that are suitable for it, or turn it into, with a little bit more encouragement, it becomes a pond and a frog habitat or something like that. So the other part to that, it's it's not necessarily site sector analysis, but it's almost like more like the bioregion we were talking about in the beginning, of sort of like understanding what your local climate is in the first place, and going, okay, well, this is the shape of my land, and it might just be that you're in a small block, but it does have some sort of shallow slope from one end to the other. But how much water are we talking about? Are you in a 650 millimeters a year, or are you in 1350 millimeters a year? And like, what's the, how much water are we dealing with running through this property? And then you can go into, okay, so then what soil is there? How is that dealing with it? What vegetation is there? And so, I'm kind of like listing all of these parts to site sector analysis as we go, but then they're all just so intertwined.
Interconnected.
It's like you can't really look at it in isolation. Anyway, you could have one person you could have two people with the same amount of water and the same topography, but one person's, got this vegetation, they don't, or this soil and they don't, and be completely different.
Well, I mean, we've got that even just on one property. So we've got horses and sheep. So we've got hooved animals who are just like, they annihilate the landscape. So we're aware of that. And we're in the process of working out the best way to manage it. But in the paddocks in front of the stable and where we feed the horses, like, we've just got, it's basically no topsoil. It's all just it's sticky, slimy, slippery clay. I've gone arse over quite a few times, but it's been an highlight. Like, and the runoff from that, we get a huge amount of runoff. So we've got to work out the best way to manage that. Yet you go over the fence into the orchard, and where we've got the chickens and the ducks, and we've got a whole range of different plants and grasses, and a whole lot of diversity in there. And same amount of rain from one side of the fence to the other. One, we barely get any runoff, and the other one, our neighbours have our topsoil. So, even just on one property, like, the difference in how it's managed.
And I think too, like, when we did our site sector, I think in my head, the best thing to do is to gather all the data and not get too bogged down in, this is a boggy spot, this is where the wind comes. Like, gather all the information and then look at it as a whole, rather than being like, I've got to manage the wind and then going, oh, now I've caused another issue in a different respect. So I think if you have all of the information, just gather it all, put it all in one spot on a piece of paper and go, okay, now I have how big my rainfall is and my topography and, am I on rock or clay or whatever? And you have all the information then to go, okay, now as a whole, what are considerations that are really going to largely impact what I want to do? Are they minimal impact? Are they going to cause a really huge impact? Yes, it's a consideration. I know that not putting a windbreak in will have this consequence, but then what's the flip side of that? Because I think they're all considerations. Just because you should have a windbreak there or it's a windy patch, you know, it is only a consideration. You need to really think about holistically what impact that's going to have on your site and what you plan to do.
Yeah, it's all that predictive patterning, isn't it? You look at the patterns that are currently in place and then that observation before interaction. Okay, well, when I do interact, what chaos am I unfolding here?
And back to that idea of temporary, like Joe and I had a conversation about windbreaks, and I said, you know, it's going to take forever for it to grow because we're starting from scratch, but is it the right decision? Like, can we put, you know, Joe's suggestion was some shade cloth up and see what impact a windbreak there or mitigating the wind's going to have, so that I can make a decision that's more permanent later on, so that you can make more informed decisions without having to guess.
I think all the locals here probably thought we were nuts, and they probably still do, because we're the randos who've come onto this couple of acres on the edge of the village, and they've got shade cloth on poles in the middle of their paddock.
Yeah. Bloody hippies.
They're like, what?
We put up probably would have been like nearly 10 foot high. This western, it's basically just we put up a shade cloth for our young orchard in the early days. We just put up a massive screen in the middle of the paddock.
They probably thought you were hiding something. some different kind of crop.
This is getting much higher.
We did exactly the same thing, but we learnt the lesson the other way around, Will, where we spent a lot of money putting trees in, and then we had a couple of years where, talk about prevailing westerly winds. Holy crap, we lost polytunnels. We thought we were going to lose roofs. Like, it was just absolutely full on. And of course, those poor little baby trees, which I put in and went, you're a tree, you're in the ground, go forth and grow, did not like that. So we had to learn the hard way. And so now, we're putting up shade cloth everywhere, because that's how you then protect putting in your windbreak. Same thing. We put a whole heap of red robins for tinnias in, thinking they're super hardy. Everyone's got them as a windbreak. It's great. And these poor little guys didn't grow because we just left them open to the elements. So you got to still protect the thing that you're putting in.
And have a succession plan, basically, of what's it going to have to look like in the beginning to get it to the stage where we want it down the track. When you said your polytunnel, Joe, it reminded me as far as resources go. So think like with building development, we need, we have engineering codes. So we can go, that data's available online where you can look at your climate data, and it's another good way to get wind ratings as well.
And very, very, very valuable to do. Otherwise, you've got to go and pick up a whole polytunnel from your neighbour's paddock in the middle of the wind. That was fun. Okay. We thought we were going to Mary Poppins like down in Lambs Valley or something. It was quite
nearly ended up at my place.
Just about, I reckon. It picked us both up off the ground as we were just trying to wrestle. We're like, what do we do? So we ended up just strapping it down in the neighbour's paddock and went, that's what we can do.
The later problem.
I was just going to say, wind is you really got to plan around it.
Yeah, so distracting.
And it can just, when you're observing, and that's the thing I was going to ask, is when you are observing, the best time to be observing the wind, the rain, the sun is when it's windy and rainy and sunny, right?
Yeah, it's worse.
Yeah, you get a good raincoat, get a hat with a string on it. Get a pair of wellies. Get used to trying to see. You're trying to get as close to seeing the property as at its worst, like in terms of favourable growing conditions. You're trying to see what's the worst I can cop here, and how do I design
the most extreme?
Yeah, and how do I design to live with that, basically?
Yeah.
And what am I prepared to forego, kind of like what you were saying, Alysse, is, it's a consideration. What am I prepared to lose? Like, worst case scenario, if I lose this strip down here, I'm not going to be heartbroken. But if I lose this section over here, which I've nurtured and loved and, tended to for years, then, that's going to cause tears. So it's looking at what can I do with what I've got.
What are some other things on the list to go through?
Well, the next we probably really start to get into. I'd look at particularly for our well for Australia particularly. I guess it's the whole country it affects really, but an early consideration for a lot of the properties that I'm looking at around here is fire risk and looking
Yeah.
at and like that's obviously not my. I'm not a professional in that context, but at least I have that dialogue with the clients to say, this is what I would expect would be your, a sector that is a zone that needs bushfire mitigation.
Mhm.
And there's some ways to predict that, but then it's also usually I'm saying, well, particularly when it's a pretty serious one, like if they're in a pretty high risk area, then I'm usually saying like, I think it's worthwhile you actually employ a consultant for when they're going to do it when they're building anyway. So we look at that. But there's other risks as well that we can plan for too. So it might be that flooding is a serious issue where you are. It could be that not necessarily for our area, but cyclonic conditions. Or then we start getting into like the human sort of behaviour, other risks, that sort of way. We've just gone through a pandemic, etc. So looking at like any risk management that needs to be factored in. Sometimes that can be like a human error risk management as well. So, and it's like this is pretty contextual, but like there's been some ones where it's like a dam on the neighbouring property, where I'm looking at, and like I'm not a dam expert, but I had like the permaculture knowledge that I have of earthworks and keyline.
It looks
and
dodgy.
I'm looking at it and going, yeah, we're not gonna plant a very expensive orchard below this because I'm just like looking at risk of failure in that context. But I mean, even right down to swales, like sometimes it's and particularly like for anyone who's listening or watching, and they've you've already got it like sort of a permaculture design in place. It can be good to go back and do a site sector analysis again on what created, and also like maybe spot some things that are human errors that just came from lack of knowledge early in the beginning of when you were designing. It's things like
interesting.
like a lot of people get into it and they're very excited to go and cut some swales into the land, catch the water, awesome, like very in the right context, perfect. But then the nuances of that, of going, well, you've actually just done that above your house. you've and now you've over the last few years you've been sinking water into the ground below the foundations of your building. So like those sort of human error things, sometimes it's I'll turn up to somewhere and just see like stuff that hasn't been done right and sometimes could have major consequences, and so that's sort of part of it, analysing it too. And then like it kind of gets into, well, we've got to go into scale of permanence a little bit at this point as well. So
I love the scale of permanence. It's my favourite.
It's like the most useful tool, isn't it? Like
so useful, and it changed the way I thought about things. Like I was like, oh, this is so important, and then when you look at the scale, you're like, oh, actually, I can change that really easily.
Yeah. So for anyone, so scale of permanence, there's different models of it.
Yeah.
What we're looking at is basically at the top of the scale, what are the things least in our control, or if we do try to control them, they are time, energy, resource, money intensive.
Yeah.
So things like climate, or trying to modify that.
Don't you have enough money to do that, Will?
Get the planes out. Then early on we've got earthworks is in that up there because it's an expensive outlay to carve a dam or something like that, or level out a pad. The all that sort of preparation for how water is going to move through the land. Whereas then, like right down at the other end of the scale of permanence is stuff that we can have a hand in changing reasonably quickly, inexpensively, with little resources or little time, and sometimes a combination of those, or all of the above.
I was surprised at how far down soil and trees and things like that were on the list. When you get to a property, you're like, what's the soil like? And you want to start improving the soil. It's like, well, actually, that's quite quick and
turn that around
cheap.
pretty quickly.
Yeah. So
and holistically, so it just, if you're doing the other parts right, you're going to improve the soil in the landscape anyway. Then that's sort of like what we're essentially doing with the site sector is working down that scale of permanence anyway. We're sort of just mapping out like what's already there as far as what's the climate, what's the water doing, what's the topography like, where are the buildings, where are the trees, etc. Right down to we can get as finicky as what's the soil here versus what's the soil in that paddock there. And so access comes into this about halfway.
I was going to say that was something you brought up earlier, access and human behavior around that as well.
So like most properties, unless it's like a completely virgin site, they're going to have an access, like the main driveway or a couple possibly. So that planning your access is your skeleton for your design. It is, you're the person or the people moving around this garden or farm that you're designing. It really has to be the bones of it. So, including that on the site sector starts to drive, like a driveway, for example, starts telling you where water collects and can be moved from. If it's it's going to be, a clearing, so it's potential for a wind funnel. It's also a spot that's difficult to shelter specifically, like if you can't plant and interrupt the passage of the vehicles through the site, that sort of thing. So it can create gaps that you can't avoid because you need to keep them open for access to and from and around the place. And then you kind of want to, if you've got particularly for a larger site, if it's a larger site, you want to kind of try to accommodate, it might be a tractor or it just might be the ute or whatever it might be. You want to try to get to as many of those parts of the property as you can, because early on, resource intensive wise, there's a lot of toing and froing, bringing stuff in, bringing materials, etc. And then there's the maintenance down the track of it too. Backyard wise, you can it's very easy to have that become a problem in the urban environment too, because if you've got got a big garden out the back, but you've got 900 millimeters down the side of the house that you can't be, bringing bulker bags through, and you've got to do everything in buckets or something like that. Like the access then makes something that could have been a pretty quick and easy job much, much harder, because you just can't get the bulk of resources through to get the job done.
And even on a smaller scale, like, planning the right width between your veggie garden beds that you can actually put your wheelbarrow legs down versus it being that, 10 centimeters shorter when you're like, fucking hell, now I've got to shovel it all and it's just hard work for no reason. Like little things like that with access can make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Like even down to in the garden, we designed pathways. We got this favourite shovel, the green shovel. Where's the green shovel? We're like, it's this beautiful lightweight concrete shovel, like it's plastic, but it's got a wide mouth on it. And we've just made the paths between the beds the width of that shovel, because we go down it and scoop wood chip up in one pass, and that's it. Instead of it just eliminates walking back and forth between. When it was like we had there was 4 rows of 4 beds or something, and you're going back and forth all the time. It's like you said, Alysse, little things like that.
There's little tweaks. And if you've got one garden bed and one path, it's not such a big deal. But when you're doing this over and over and over and over and over again, at the end of the day, that makes a huge difference.
Or the deck of your, zero turn, is that little bit wider, and you can't then, turn in that, things like that. Especially when planting orchards, if there's grass underneath or, you know, hard edges that you have to mow up against and those
it's like
little
when
things.
you see wedges of lawn.
Oh, yes.
Right? And so design that, and like, you know, we're all about the organic natural shapes anyway, but, you know, design an edge that's easier to maintain than trying to get, you know,
Yeah, we did that with our talking about zero-turn mowers. So we've got our little ride-on and our trailer, and that's how we move most of our, you know, our inputs and outputs around the property. And we've made this beautiful path around, you know, the chicken coops, the garden beds, into the orchard, except for one section that we made too skinny. So we can't just cut through. We've got to do the big loop to do. Yep. So we're now in the process of, we're actually redesigning. So that's just going to be a pedestrian path. It'll be redundant for the mower. But you know, it was just an oversight. And then, you know, we went to go down there and went, oh, yeah, we're like this much too short. You know, it's just that consideration.
Yeah, and you know, you can get right down to, you know, which way does the gate swing, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Like, it can make just in terms of, like, you know, if you're doing a permaculture design, you're really working this property on a daily basis. It's those little things that become really beautiful. The gate just opens nicely. It doesn't hit that shrub. It blocks the chickens coming down this path while I'm encouraging them to go into that one. It's just, you know, like you can really get into that.
Yeah. We're coming up on nearly an hour now. Is there anything else we need to touch on?
There's a few more. So the other parts are very much still living thing interactions then. So wildlife is an important one to plot on there. It might be that you've got like certain corridors of a property, or it might be like, you know,
a fence.
The back fence being the cat highway in town, that sort of thing. It might be the firewheel tree in the neighbour's yard, that's where the possums like to hang out, and then, you know, put your veggies too close, they'll come down for a picnic. So it's planning, take your observations of wildlife and at least document it so that you can plan accordingly. In the end, they might not influence it all that much. There might be the sun, the wind, water, topography, your movements all saying veggie patch goes here, and this little part says, yeah, but the possum is here. And you go, well, too bad, I'll just net it. But, you know, we'll design around it. And then the sort of the human behavior stuff. I like to get the overhead of the property, and I want to know where all the doors and windows are. So I want to know those access paths in and out of the house. Particularly want to know where the laundry and the kitchen is. So kitchen for food in and out, laundry because it's out to the clothesline. That whole carry the full basket of clothes out, bring the empty basket back, but bring it back full of whatever you've picked out in the garden. So improving that energy flow. Where do you put the bins out? You know, it's something you've got to do every week. So what can you put on that walk when you're going and doing that? And then the views. So I want to know where the windows are so that you're planning the garden around, like, is there a borrowed view outside of your landscape, or is it an immediate view in the garden that you want to keep? Either way, that we like, if you plant that, if you pick, you know, the golden property and then you go and plant those views out, then you've just really detracted from what you started from in the first place. So, which probably like isn't a massive permaculture thing to say. I don't know. Like, it's not. I'm not about I'd rather preserve a view than drive something to maximum productivity.
Yeah.
Whereas not everyone will agree with that.
Yeah, aesthetics are important though. Like that, waking up and, you know, at the moment our tiny house, we lay in bed and we look out to the canopy of the gum trees. We won't have that in the house because we've got clearing around the house for safety reasons, and bushfire rating. But you know, I said to Mum, I'm really jealous that that's going to be your view that you look out to. But now thinking, okay, well, what can I plant out that bedroom window? Or am I going to plant a windbreak of, you know, banner grass, and I wake up and I see banner grass instead of my veggie patch? Or, you know, having those considerations I think is important. And it makes me want to go out into the garden because it's appealing and, it, you know, it lures me out there to want to be doing it.
Yeah, if something's beautiful, then I think beauty improves function.
Totally.
It does. Yeah,
Like,
I agree.
because it makes it more user friendly. It's more likely to be something that becomes a success than not.
Well, no one wants to be in an environment that, feels, depressive, or it's a bit of a shit fight or something like that, because all
Yeah.
you see is the work that you've got to do or the things that you haven't done. Like, it highlights the negative, I suppose, as opposed to having that moment. Like, we've got roses and grapevines that we've planted out on the western side outside the kitchen door. So as soon as we walk out, and that's our house is designed weirdly. That's our front door and our kitchen door. So that's our main thoroughfare. So when we walk along there, all we smell is roses. And in summer, it's totally shaded out by the grapevines. And we've got to
Yeah.
walk out there to access the cars, to access the garden, to go to the washing line. Everything we do is through that space. And it makes me smile. Even walking out here this morning, there's a whole heap of rose petals on the ground because we had a little bit of wind, a bit of a breeze last night. And I just looked at that and went, oh, like, that just looks so pretty. Like the flowers are done. It just looks gorgeous.
Yeah.
And they're those things that you go, yeah, I want to be out there. Whereas, if I just had, a patch of rickety weeds, I'd go, I'll deal with that later. I don't want to know about it.
And vice versa, we can design around the ugly things as well.
Yeah.
So, if power lines, for example, or like that are, the pole is there. Yes, the wires might be there, but a tree planted between me and that can take that out of the view, or because you're going to map all that infrastructure stuff as well anyway. So you're going to know where your power lines are, where any underground, if you want to know your pipes, your septic, etc.
Yeah.
Can you screen out that you're not looking at,
and
something
sometimes
that they want to, basically.
Sometimes it's unavoidable. Like, our septic has to be at the front of our block because of the slope of it. And so we're literally going to drive in and see this concrete tank.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that sucks, but we're going to use plants to help screen it out. So it's like you said, being able to do that.
Yeah.
Anything else we should be considering?
You want to know? Yeah, I mean, we're sort of just thinking like we've come down through the scale of permanence. We mentioned sort of like the boggy spots, but not frost. You want to know, if you're in a zone that's prone to that. That's a consideration as well. It's really just you want to look at what are the climatic or environmental influences. We've talked about like what are the human influences on the place, and that's your behaviour, neighbours, and then your surrounding community, or like the history of the property can give you a heat, and that can be hard to find, but can tell you a lot about like what to expect when you dig a hole, where pipes are, and where is it building rubble, is it etc. And then all those sort of wildlife influences as well. So once you sort of collate all of that together, and especially if you can do it over a 12-month period to see the property in all seasons, at least that's going to give you a very good starting point before you make major decisions anyway. Like do those things that are easy to change and move and enjoy them, but know that they might not be part of the master plan.
My last question would be, and I kind of alluded to it before, then how do you stop kind of the overwhelm as well? Like, you've got all this information. It's like, how do you weigh up what's more important, or what things? I mean, I guess the scale of permanence helps with that somewhat, but when you've got all this information, I'm finding, especially with the blank slate, inverted commas, blank slate, the overwhelm of like, well, where do I start, or what's more important, or what factors do I need to consider, and almost the inaction, because it's like, oh, but should I wait until I know this, or do I need more information, versus jumping in and doing it, or prioritizing one thing over another.
So analysis paralysis, as we say.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I think as you work through the design process, you're stacking all of these observations with the scale of permanence, and you're stacking it with other tools as well. So you're doing like a zones overlay from 1 to 5, sort of looking at where do I immediately want to spend my time, where do I want to only spend this much time, right out to what am I leaving alone. Really, like, I think the big one probably is your vision statement as well.
Yes.
Like if you've got the vision for your design, that's your guiding and statement that's going to bring you back to your intentions, really.
Yeah.
And if you are totally overwhelmed by it, I do say to people, like, this is the way to approach it, because it really comes down to what that person or the family need. But essentially, we're looking at, can we just get zone 1 or zone 2 as well? If we're doing fruit trees, is usually a pretty important consideration as well. So can we just do zone 1 and 2? And can we get comfortable with where those elements are going, how they're fitting into the site sector? On the rest of the map, we could just still have bubbles. We could still just say zone 3, 4, 5. But can we get more specific just around the house and say, right, are those elements protected? Are they being designed in a way that they're going to work in the short and the long term? And in the short term, it might be temporary stuff like shade cloths and things like that. And then it fits into a design that the rest the detail can unfold. So you get the patterns right.
Yeah.
Do your immediate details around the house.
Yeah.
Get out and detail the rest when the time comes.
I heard a really good podcast, actually, it jogged my memory, between Meg McGowan and Dan Palmer. It was his podcast.
Yeah.
And his advice was actually to start at your back door and start at your fence line and then work your way in, because you need things like shelter belts. You need like those external out. Yeah. And so you kind of start at the back door and the fence line, and then slowly you bring it together until you meet in the middle, because some of those bigger scale things are going to influence your house. So you know, maybe not to just start at your back door,
like you said,
but
your shelter belts. You could really get away with, I think, you do your zone 1 and 2, and then whatever shelter you needed to have provided, and the in-between will happen.
Yeah.
I think that's a really, really great point to end on in those considerations. So I know that we've asked you this question before, Will, so we always ask a grounding question at the end of every episode. But I suppose, you've touched on a little bit there about, where to start if you are in overwhelm. But I suppose what one little piece of advice could you give to someone about starting with a site sector analysis? So what would you say to someone who's never done that before?
Keep it simple. Get yourself a. I think this is still in the realms of being simple. Is to get a screen grab of your property from above, even if it's just on your phone. And I think you could do a screen shot on your phone of Google Maps, and then pinch, zoom, little edit, and start just squiggling as you're wandering around the place. It's really just about like collecting information. It's about brain dumping it so that you can sort of get it all in front of you and beat that overwhelm when you're sort of standing out in the garden. When you're just sort of standing there like this for like 20 minutes at a time, just looking, and taking that away, because it's you're starting to put things on paper or even just on your phone, and helping you process it all.
So taking it from your environment and out of your head and putting it down.
Turning it into something you can manipulate, like start to play with, rather than it being all just like this fuzziness that's up there going, I've got to deal with this and this and this. How am I going to make it all work together?
Absolutely. And we all love the fuzziness. We've all been there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Trying to work through some sort of system. Yeah.
And so where can our listeners find you?
You can, if you
at the pub.
Google. We oh god, we said that the other day. We're like, I don't want my son getting asked at school, what does your dad do? Oh, he's always at the no, you'll find us at Maplewood Permaculture. We're on all the. We mainly use Instagram. Instagram and our website. And permaculture at the pub. So perhaps at a venue near you.
Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It's been an absolute joy.
Pleasure as always.
Always love talking to you. Thanks,
All right.
Will.
Thanks, guys.
All right, bye.
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 Thanks for listening to the Practical Permaculture podcast. Jump onto our Facebook group to keep the chat going and to look for any resources that we mentioned on today's show. Look in the show notes.
And if you liked the episode today, then subscribe. Please give us a review and share. And if you didn't, then that's okay. We'll sure you'll find the right podcast for you.
Bye.
Bye.